The whispers followed Violet Anderson everywhere at the charity gala. They trailed her like perfume, clinging to the air around her as she navigated through the glittering ballroom of the Grand Mason Hotel in downtown Boston. Behind delicate champagne flutes and designer clutches, the elite of New England society exchanged hushed comments and darting glances, their eyes always landing on the same person, Catherine Wells, the blind daughter of tech billionaire Richard Wells. Violet tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear and adjusted her posture, feeling desperately out of place among the designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. As the newly hired music therapist at the prestigious Eastwood Academy for the Visually Impaired, she had only received her invitation to the fundraiser 3 days ago when one of the regular staff members fell ill. Now sipping sparkling water and wearing her only formal dress, a modest emerald number she'd worn to her cousin's wedding 2 years ago, she observed the room with a mixture of awe and discomfort. "That's her," a woman in a midnight blue dress whispered to her companion. "Richard Wells's daughter, 23 years old and blind since birth. Such a tragedy for such a powerful family." "I heard she's some kind of musical genius," the companion replied, "but so awkward in social settings. The father rarely brings her to events." Violet's grip tightened around her glass. She had only been working with Catherine for 2 weeks, but already she recognized the casual cruelty in how people discussed her. Catherine wasn't just the blind daughter or the tragedy. She was a complex young woman with extraordinary musical gifts and a sharp mind that Violet was only beginning to understand. Across the room, Catherine sat alone at a round table, her posture perfect, her hands folded in her lap, her chestnut hair cascaded over her shoulders in elegant waves, and her deep burgundy gown complemented her fair skin. Custom-made dark glasses obscured her eyes, but Violet had seen them during their sessions, pale blue with a cloudy film that did nothing to diminish their expressiveness. No one approached Catherine's table. The guests milled about, sampling hors d'oeuvres and admiring the auction items, but they gave her a wide berth, as if blindness were contagious. Before Violet could overthink it, she found herself walking toward Catherine's table. "Mind if I join you?" Violet asked, then immediately clarified, "It's Violet Anderson, your Monday and Wednesday music therapist." A smile transformed Catherine's face. "Violet, I didn't know you'd be here." Her voice was melodic, with precise diction that Violet had noticed during their sessions. "Please sit down. This chair has been reserved for my father for the past hour, but he's busy networking. He won't mind if you take it." As Violet settled into the chair, she noticed the tension in Catherine's shoulders. "Not enjoying the party?" she asked gently. Catherine's mouth quirked. "Is it that obvious? I can feel everyone staring, wondering why poor blind Catherine is sitting all alone. They're probably placing bets on whether I'll spill my drink or knock over the centerpiece." "For what it's worth, you look incredible," Violet said. "That dress is stunning." "Thank you." My father's assistant picked it out. Catherine reached for her water glass with careful precision. "People think blindness means I don't care about appearance. But I do. I just experience it differently." Their conversation flowed easily, a stark contrast to the stilted small talk happening around them. Catherine asked thoughtful questions about Violet's background, her music education at Berklee College of Music, her previous work with children with disabilities, her favorite composers. In turn, Violet learned that Catherine had been homeschooled by private tutors, had perfect pitch and played 6 instruments. "The piano is my true love, though," Catherine confided. "When I play, I forget that there's anything I can't do." "I've only heard you play once during our assessment, but it was remarkable," Violet said sincerely. "You have a gift." Before Catherine could respond, a tall man with silver-streaked dark hair and piercing blue eyes approached their table. Even without his custom-tailored Tom Ford tuxedo and the deference of those he passed, Richard Wells commanded attention. His face, familiar from countless magazine covers and news segments, was handsome but severe, with lines etched by years of high-stakes business decisions. "Catherine," he said, his voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being heard, "I need to introduce you to Senator Williams and his wife. They're major donors to Eastwood." His gaze slid to Violet, evaluating her with cool efficiency. "I don't believe we've met," Catherine interjected smoothly. "Dad, this is Violet Anderson, my new music therapist from Eastwood. Violet, my father, Richard Wells." He offered a firm handshake and a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "A pleasure. Catherine has always responded well to music therapy. I hope you're finding your work rewarding." Before Violet could answer, he returned his attention to his daughter. "The senator is waiting, Catherine. His wife particularly wanted to meet you. Apparently their niece is also visually impaired." Catherine's expression remained neutral, but Violet noticed her fingers tensing against the tablecloth. "Of course, Dad. More inspiration porn for the donors." Richard frowned. "Catherine, it's fine." She stood gracefully. "Violet, would you mind helping me to their table? Dad needs to greet the mayor who just arrived." Richard hesitated, then nodded curtly. "I'll join you in a moment." With that, he strode away toward the entrance, where the mayor and his entourage were being received. Catherine extended her arm, and Violet rose to guide her. "I'm sorry about this," Catherine murmured as they navigated between tables. "These functions are all the same. People either avoid me completely or want to tell me how inspiring I am for managing to exist while blind." As they approached the senator's table, Catherine added in a whisper, "The worst part is that I'm supposed to perform tonight. Dad arranged it without asking me. I'm to play a piece on the grand piano after dinner, a perfect demonstration of the success of Eastwood's programs." Violet nearly stopped in her tracks. "Tonight? But we haven't prepared anything for a performance." "Welcome to my life," Catherine said with a brittle smile. "Dad makes decisions and I adapt. I've been practicing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major all week, but—" She hesitated. "The truth is, I've composed something of my own, something personal. I've never performed my own work in public before." The vulnerability in Catherine's voice struck Violet. During their sessions, Catherine had been polite but guarded, working diligently on the exercises, but revealing little of herself. This was the first crack in her carefully maintained facade. "Your own composition would be beautiful," Violet said softly, "and more meaningful." "Maybe," Catherine replied as they reached the senator's table, "but my father expects Chopin." She straightened her posture and transformed her expression into one of pleasant cordiality. "Senator Williams? I'm Catherine Wells. I understand you wanted to meet me." As Catherine engaged in the practiced social dance of philanthropy, Violet stepped back, observing the room with new eyes. The glittering gala suddenly seemed hollow, a performance where wealth was the costume and charity the script. And at the center of it all was Catherine, playing her assigned role while hiding her true self behind dark glasses. Later, as dinner concluded and Richard Wells approached the podium to give his speech about the importance of supporting institutions like Eastwood Academy, Violet caught Catherine's subtle expression of anxiety. In less than 30 minutes, she would be expected to perform flawlessly before hundreds of critical eyes, playing music selected not by her heart, but by expectation. And in that moment, watching Catherine's fingers trace nervous patterns on the tablecloth, Violet made a decision that would alter both their lives in ways neither could imagine. Richard Wells's speech droned on with practiced charm, his words striking the perfect balance between humility and authority, as he detailed the Wells Foundation's commitment to educational opportunities for the visually impaired. The audience nodded appreciatively, captivated by the charismatic billionaire whose journey from college dropout to tech mogul had been chronicled in countless business profiles. "My daughter Catherine has been my greatest teacher," Richard said, gesturing toward her table. "Through her, I've learned that vision takes many forms, and true sight often comes from within." Catherine's expression remained carefully neutral, but Violet noticed her fingers curling into a fist beneath the table. The tension radiating from her was palpable, a stark contrast to the polished image her father was presenting to the crowd. "He always does this," Catherine whispered, barely moving her lips. "Uses my blindness as an emotional hook for his speeches." As applause filled the ballroom, Violet leaned closer. "Is there anything I can do to help with your performance?" "Just walk me to the piano when it's time," Catherine replied. "And maybe stay close by." The vulnerability in her request touched something in Violet. In the 2 weeks they'd worked together, Catherine had been unfailingly independent, often refusing assistance even when navigating unfamiliar spaces in the music room. This small admission of need felt significant. "Of course," Violet promised, "I'll be right there." As dinner plates were cleared and dessert served, a distinguished older gentleman approached their table. Jackson Howard, the longtime director of Eastwood Academy, was a tall, lean man with kind eyes and a scholarly demeanor. He greeted Catherine warmly before turning to Violet. "Ms. Anderson, I'm delighted you could attend tonight. Catherine's previous therapist spoke highly of your methods," he said, his voice carrying the slight lilt of his Louisiana upbringing. "I hope you're settling in well at Eastwood." "Very well, thank you," Violet replied, surprised by his personal attention. "The facilities are impressive and the students are wonderful. Music has always been central to our approach," Jackson explained. "For many of our students, it provides both emotional expression and practical benefits for spatial awareness and cognitive development." He turned back to Catherine with obvious affection. This one was composing melodies before most children could form complete sentences. Catherine smiled genuinely for the first time that evening. "Mr. Howard exaggerates. He's known me since I was 6. "I do not exaggerate," Jackson countered warmly. "I still have recordings of those early compositions. Primitive, naturally, but with clear melodic instincts." As they conversed, Violet observed the ease between them, a stark contrast to the formality between Catherine and her father. Jackson spoke to Catherine as a person, not a symbol or an obligation, and she responded with an openness Violet hadn't witnessed before. "Will you play one of your own pieces tonight?" Jackson asked Catherine. Her smile faded. "Dad wants Chopin. It's what the donors expect. Classical refinement. Nothing too personal or provocative." Jackson frowned slightly. "Your father means well, Catherine, but music should come from the heart, not from expectations." He patted her hand. "Whatever you play, I know it will be magnificent." After Jackson departed, Catherine turned toward Violet. "He's one of the few people who's always seen me as more than my disability. He fought to create a real music program at Eastwood when most boards thought it was a waste of resources for blind students." "He seems to care about you a great deal," Violet observed. "He was my first real piano teacher," Catherine explained. "When other instructors said I'd never master certain techniques because I couldn't see the keyboard, he developed alternative methods. He'd place my hands on his as he played, helping me feel the movements before trying them myself." The conversation shifted as Catherine asked about Violet's background. Unlike their professional interactions at Eastwood, where Catherine maintained a polite distance, she now seemed genuinely curious about Violet's life. "Why music therapy?" Catherine asked. "With your training, you could perform or teach at a prestigious conservatory." The question caught Violet off guard. Few people asked about her career choice with such directness. "I grew up with a younger brother who has autism," she explained. "Traditional therapies helped him in many ways, but music was what truly reached him. I saw how it built bridges where words couldn't." Catherine nodded thoughtfully. "And now?" "He's 22 and studies computer science at MIT, Violet said with pride. "Still plays the drums in a band with his friends." Before Catherine could respond, Richard Wells appeared at their table, his expression tense despite his public smile. "It's almost time for your performance," he said to Catherine. "The donors are anticipating it greatly." He glanced at Violet, his gaze assessing. "I see you've been keeping my daughter company, Miss Anderson. I appreciate your attention to her comfort." The way he phrased it, as if Violet had been performing a service rather than engaging in genuine conversation, made her bristle internally. But she maintained her professional composure. "Catherine has been excellent company," she replied. "You must be very proud of her musical accomplishments." Richard's expression softened slightly. "Of course. Catherine's talents have always been exceptional, despite her challenges." He checked his watch, a timepiece Violet recognized as costing more than her annual salary. "The stage is being prepared now. Catherine, are you ready?" Catherine nodded, her face once again a mask of composure. "Yes, Dad. I'll play the Chopin as discussed." As Richard walked away to confer with the event coordinator, Catherine turned to Violet, her voice low and urgent. "I've made a decision. I'm not playing Chopin tonight." Violet's eyes widened. "What will you play instead?" "My own composition, the one I've been working on for months." Catherine's hands trembled slightly, but her voice was resolute. "Dad will be furious, but I can't keep performing only what others expect of me." The announcement for Catherine's performance came minutes later. Richard returned to escort his daughter to the stage, but Catherine interjected smoothly. "Violet has already agreed to help me, Dad. You should stay with the mayor. I know how important that connection is for the new tech campus." Richard hesitated, clearly torn between public obligation and personal control. "Very well," he finally conceded. "But remember what we discussed. The Chopin piece has the perfect emotional resonance for tonight's audience." After he departed, Catherine exhaled slowly. That was easier than expected. He never says no when it involves networking opportunities. As they rose from the table, Catherine gripped Violet's arm with surprising strength. "There's something I haven't told you," she whispered, "about the piece I'm going to play. It's personal, not just to me." Before Violet could ask what she meant, they were intercepted by a striking woman in her early 50s, elegantly dressed in a tailored midnight blue pantsuit. Her silver-streaked dark hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, and her resemblance to Richard was unmistakable. "Catherine," she said warmly, embracing her. "You look beautiful, darling." "Aunt Eliza." Catherine's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "I didn't know you were coming tonight. I wouldn't miss my niece's performance," Eliza Wells replied, her gaze moving curiously to Violet. "And who is your friend?" After introductions, Eliza pulled Catherine aside for a brief, intense conversation that Violet couldn't hear. Catherine's expression shifted from surprise to determination, and when they rejoined Violet, there was a new energy about her. "My aunt has just informed me that my father is planning to announce a major restructuring of Eastwood's programs tonight," Catherine explained quietly as they continued toward the stage. "He's shifting funding away from the arts toward technology-focused education. Mr. Howard doesn't even know yet." Violet felt a chill. "But the music therapy program would be reduced to a supplementary activity rather than a core component," Catherine finished, her voice tight, "all in the name of preparing blind students for the real world of employment." As they reached the side of the stage, where a gleaming black grand piano waited under soft spotlights, Catherine turned to face Violet. "Now do you understand why I need to play my own composition tonight? Music isn't just a parlor trick to impress donors. It's essential to who we are, how we connect, how we heal." The event coordinator approached, gesturing that it was time. Cameras flashed as Violet guided Catherine onto the stage, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon them. Richard Wells watched from near the podium, his expression confident but controlled. Catherine's fingers brushed Violet's wrist as they reached the piano. "Stay close," she whispered. "After I play, everything will change." As Violet helped Catherine settle onto the piano bench, she noticed something that sent a wave of uncertainty through her. Catherine's hands were shaking, not with nerves, but with what looked like physical strain. And behind her dark glasses, there was something more than blindness in her eyes. A secret Violet suddenly realized she'd missed entirely during their therapy sessions. The ballroom fell silent as Catherine positioned herself at the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys, a moment of stillness before the storm. Violet stood just off stage, close enough to see the subtle rise and fall of Catherine's shoulders as she took a deep breath. When Catherine's fingers finally touched the keys, the notes that emerged weren't the familiar soothing patterns of Chopin's Nocturne. Instead, a powerful original melody filled the room, raw, complex, and undeniably personal. The composition began with a delicate questioning motif that gradually built in intensity, incorporating elements of classical structure with surprising modern harmonies. Violet watched Richard Wells's expression transform from polite anticipation to confusion, and then tightly controlled anger. He glanced around the room, gauging the audience's reaction, but they were captivated. Catherine's body swayed with the music, her technique flawless as she navigated the emotional landscape of her own creation. The piece told a story. That much was clear even without words. It spoke of struggle and constraint, of yearning for freedom, and finally of transformation. As the composition reached its crescendo, tears streamed down Catherine's face, yet her playing never faltered. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of profound silence before the audience erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, moved by both the music and the visible emotion of the performer. Catherine sat motionless at the piano, her hands now resting in her lap, her face turned toward the sound of appreciation. Violet moved quickly to help her from the stage, but Richard reached Catherine first, his public smile firmly in place, though his eyes blazed with controlled fury. "That was unexpected," he said quietly, guiding his daughter from the piano. "We'll discuss this later." Catherine's Aunt Eliza intercepted them as they left the stage, placing herself physically between father and daughter. "That was magnificent, Catherine," she said firmly, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Your most powerful work yet." The tension between the Wells family members was palpable, but they maintained their public composure as donors and board members swarmed around them, offering effusive praise for Catherine's talent. Violet hung back, uncertain of her role now that the performance was complete. She observed the complex family dynamics with growing concern. Richard's controlled anger, Eliza's protective stance, and Catherine's mixture of defiance and fatigue created an undercurrent that belied the celebration happening around them. Jackson Howard approached Violet, his expression troubled. "I've never heard that composition before," he said quietly. It was extraordinary, but I fear there will be consequences. Richard doesn't tolerate public deviation from his plans. She was amazing, Violet replied. I don't understand why her father would be upset about such a triumphant performance. Jackson sighed. It's not about the quality of the music, Ms. Anderson. It's about control. Richard Wells built his fortune by controlling every variable, eliminating uncertainty. Catherine's independence has always been challenging for him to accept. Before they could continue, Catherine broke away from the crowd and made her way toward them, moving with purpose despite her fatigue. Violet, she said urgently, I need some air. Would you help me find a quiet place? With a quick glance toward Richard, who was deep in conversation with a group of potential donors, Violet guided Catherine through a side door into a deserted hallway. Once they were alone, Catherine seemed to deflate, leaning heavily against the wall. Are you all right? Violet asked, alarmed by Catherine's sudden pallor. I will be, Catherine replied. I just need a moment. She removed her dark glasses, revealing her pale blue eyes. Too much excitement for one night. Violet noticed Catherine's hands trembling again, more violently than before. Catherine, what's going on? This seems like more than performance anxiety. Catherine hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. You're more perceptive than most people, Violet. That's why I requested you specifically as my therapist. She took a deep breath. My condition is complicated. The blindness is only part of it. Before she could elaborate, the door opened, and Richard Wells stepped into the hallway, his face a mask of controlled displeasure. Catherine, the chairman of the board wants to speak with you, he said, his tone brooking no argument. His gaze settled coldly on Violet. Ms. Anderson, I believe your professional obligations for the evening are complete. Catherine straightened, replacing her glasses. Dad, Violet is here as my guest now, not just as my therapist. Nevertheless, Richard said smoothly, this is a family matter, which is precisely why I asked her to stay, came Eliza's voice as she joined them in the hallway. Catherine needs someone in her corner who isn't entangled in Wells' family politics. Richard's jaw tightened. Eliza, you're overstepping. Am I? Eliza challenged. You're planning to gut Eastwood's music program without consulting the person who's benefited from it most, your own daughter. If anyone's overstepping, it's you. The siblings stared at each other with matching intensity, decades of unresolved tension crackling between them. Catherine swayed slightly, her hand reaching out for support. Violet moved quickly to steady her, alarmed by how rapidly her conditions seemed to be deteriorating. She needs to sit down, Violet said firmly, professional concern overriding her intimidation of Richard Wells. Something in her tone cut through the family standoff. Richard looked at his daughter properly for the first time, noticing her pallor and trembling hands. His expression shifted from anger to concern. When did you last take your medication? He asked, his voice softening. This morning, Catherine admitted. I didn't want to feel foggy during the performance. Eliza muttered something under her breath that sounded like a curse. Catherine, you promised you wouldn't skip doses anymore. Violet looked between them in confusion. Medication? Is this related to your blindness? A moment of uncomfortable silence followed before Catherine sighed. No, it's not. The blindness is congenital. I was born with it. The medication is for something else entirely. She hesitated, then continued with quiet determination. I have Stargardt's disease, which caused my blindness, but I also have early-onset Parkinson's disease. I was diagnosed 3 years ago at 20. The revelation hit Violet like a physical blow. Early-onset Parkinson's was extremely rare in someone so young. It explained the tremors she'd noticed, the occasional stiffness in Catherine's movements during their sessions that she'd attributed to caution due to blindness. That's why the music is so important to you, Violet realized aloud. That's not just artistic expression. It's therapy for your motor skills, your coordination. Catherine nodded. Music has been my lifeline. The structured movements, the neural pathways it creates, they've helped slow the progression. Mr. Howard developed a special program for me when I was first diagnosed, combining traditional therapy with musical training. Which your father now wants to dismantle, Eliza added pointedly. Richard's expression hardened again. I'm not dismantling anything. I'm evolving the program to focus on technological solutions, adaptive software, AI companions, cutting-edge treatments. Music is valuable, but it's not a cure. It's kept me functioning, Catherine countered, her voice gaining strength despite her physical weakness. The doctors said I'd be significantly more impaired by now without it. That's what tonight's performance was about, showing what music therapy can accomplish, even in complex cases like mine. As they argued, Violet noticed Jackson Howard hovering uncertainly at the end of the hallway, clearly hesitant to interrupt the family discussion. When he caught her eye, he gestured urgently for her to join him. "Excuse me," Violet said, stepping away from the Wells family circle. "I'll be right back." Jackson led her a few paces away, his voice low and urgent. "I've just been informed about Richard's plans for restructuring. The board is voting tonight after the gala." His face was grave. "They're planning to terminate half the music therapy staff, including you, Ms. Anderson." Violet felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath her feet. "But I've only just started," she protested. "And the program is clearly beneficial. Catherine's performance demonstrated that." "Richard has convinced most of the board that technology is the future of assistance for the visually impaired," Jackson explained. "He's bringing in a team from his tech company to develop proprietary software. Music therapy will be reduced to a recreational activity, not a core treatment method." The pieces suddenly clicked into place for Violet. That's why Catherine changed her performance. She was trying to show everyone the value of what might be lost. Jackson nodded. "Exactly. And based on the audience's reaction, she made a powerful statement." He glanced back toward the Wells family. "But Richard rarely changes course once he's decided on something. He genuinely believes technology is the answer to Catherine's conditions." "And what do you believe?" Violet asked. "I believe in a holistic approach," Jackson replied. "Technology has its place, but so does human connection through music. Catherine needs both." He hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Richard didn't want to hire you originally. Catherine specifically requested you after attending a workshop you gave at Berkeley last year." This revelation stunned Violet. She had given a guest lecture on music therapy for neurological conditions, never knowing that Catherine Wells had been in the audience. "She said your approach was different," Jackson continued, "more intuitive, less clinical. She believed you could help not just with her motor skills but with expressing what she couldn't say in words." As this new understanding dawned, Violet looked back at Catherine, seeing her in an entirely new light. Not just as a billionaire's blind daughter, not just as a talented pianist, but as a young woman fighting multiple battles simultaneously, against physical limitations, against her father's well-meaning but controlling protection, and against a world that defined her by what she couldn't do rather than what she could. And in that moment, as Catherine stood her ground against her powerful father, despite her trembling hands, Violet made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives. Violet rejoined the Wells family, her mind racing with everything she had just learned. The stakes were higher than she'd realized, not just Catherine's personal expression through music, but the future of a program that served as vital therapy for her condition and could benefit countless other students. "I apologize for the interruption," Violet said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Mr. Howard was updating me on tonight's agenda." Richard Wells checked his watch. "The board meeting begins in 20 minutes. Catherine, you should rest. I'll have my driver take you home." "I'm staying," Catherine insisted, though her fatigue was evident. "This is about my future, and the future of students like me. I have a right to be there." Richard's expression softened marginally. "Your health comes first. You've already made your statement with that unexpected performance." "Which the donors loved," Eliza pointed out. "They're still talking about it in there. You might want to consider what that tells you about the value of the music program." Before Richard could respond, Violet spoke up, surprising herself with her boldness. "Mr. Wells, if I may, Catherine's performance tonight wasn't just artistically impressive. It demonstrated the neurological benefits of music therapy for conditions like hers. The fine motor control, the emotional regulation, the cognitive mapping, these are all therapeutic outcomes that technology alone can't provide." Richard regarded her coolly. "Ms. Anderson, while I appreciate your professional opinion, you've worked with my daughter for barely 2 weeks. I've spent 23 years supporting her care and education." "And you've done an admirable job," Violet acknowledged. "Catherine's abilities are a testament to that, but as someone who's both a musician and a therapist, I can tell you that what she did tonight goes beyond talent. It shows how music creates neural pathways that help manage her conditions." Catherine reached out, finding Violet's arm with uncanny precision. "She's right, Dad. The tremors are always less severe after I play. The neurologists confirmed it last year. Remember Dr. Mendez's report? The quantifiable improvement in my fine motor skills correlated directly with my music practice." Richard's expression remained impassive. but Violet noticed a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Eliza pressed the advantage. "Richard, you've always approached problems with data," she said, "but you're ignoring the empirical evidence right in front of you. Catherine's doctors support this approach. The audience tonight saw its effectiveness. Why are you so determined to replace something that works with unproven technology?" For the first time, Richard seemed at a loss for words. The confident billionaire who controlled boardrooms and shaped industries looked suddenly vulnerable, his carefully constructed certainty cracking. "Because technology is predictable," he finally admitted, his voice lower. "It can be controlled, improved, replicated. Catherine's conditions will progress. That's the medical reality. I need solutions I can scale, not individual musical talent." "Dad," Catherine's voice softened, "you can't control everything, especially not this." The raw truth of her statement hung in the air between them. Before Richard could respond, the hallway door opened and a young assistant appeared, looking apologetic. "Mr. Wells, the board is gathering early at Chairman Porter's request. They'd like to begin in 5 minutes. Richard straightened his tie, his businessman's mask slipping back into place. "Tell them I'll be right there." As the assistant departed, he turned to Catherine. "This discussion isn't over, but the decision tonight will proceed as planned." As he moved to leave, Catherine reached for his hand, stopping him. "At least let me address the board before they vote. Let them hear directly from someone who's benefited from the program." Richard hesitated, then nodded curtly. 5 minutes, Catherine. That's all I can promise." As he strode away, Catherine leaned heavily against the wall, the confrontation having drained her limited energy reserves. "I need to take my medication," she admitted. "It's in my purse at the table." "I'll get it," Eliza offered, hurrying back into the ballroom. Left alone with Catherine, Violet found herself overwhelmed with admiration for the young woman's courage. "That composition you played, it was about this, wasn't it? About fighting to be heard?" Catherine smiled tiredly. "It was about transformation, about how music helped me find my voice when I had every reason to remain silent." She paused. "But it was also about you." "Me?" Violet asked, startled. "The middle section, the part with the interwoven melodies, that was inspired by your workshop last year. The way you described music therapy as a conversation between instruments, between therapist and patient. It changed how I thought about my own compositions." Before Violet could process this revelation, Eliza returned with Catherine's medication and a glass of water. After taking it, Catherine insisted on proceeding to the board meeting immediately. "The medication takes about 20 minutes to fully work," she explained. "I want to speak to them before it makes me too drowsy." The boardroom was located in a quiet wing of the hotel, its mahogany table surrounded by the 12 members of Eastwood's governing body. Richard sat at the head, his posture commanding respect, despite the earlier confrontation. Jackson Howard occupied the seat to his right, his expression grave. When Catherine entered, aided by Violet, conversation ceased. Chairman Porter, a distinguished gentleman in his 70s, rose in deference. "Ms. Wells, we weren't expecting you to join us tonight. Your performance was extraordinary." "Thank you," Catherine replied. "I understand you're voting on significant changes to Eastwood's curriculum, particularly regarding the music therapy program. Before you do, I'd like to share my perspective, as both a beneficiary of that program and as someone whose family has supported Eastwood for generations." Richard's jaw tightened, but he nodded his permission. As Catherine made her way to the front of the room, her movements were noticeably stiffer, the tremor in her right hand more pronounced. "Parkinson's disease affects approximately 1 in 10,000 people under the age of 50, Catherine began, her voice clear despite her physical fatigue. "For those of us with early-onset Parkinson's, the prognosis is particularly challenging, because we face potentially decades of progressive neurological decline." She paused, allowing the sobering reality to settle over the room. "When I was diagnosed 3 years ago, my neurologist presented various treatment options. Medication, of course, physical therapy, experimental procedures. But it was Jackson Howard who suggested an intensive music therapy program might help preserve my motor function." Catherine gestured toward Jackson, who nodded encouragingly. "Mr. Howard developed a specialized curriculum that integrated my musical training with therapeutic techniques. The results have been measurable and significant. My neurologist credits this approach with slowing the progression of my symptoms by approximately 30% compared to statistical projections." She turned toward her father, her face softening. "My father wants the best for me, he always has. His proposal to enhance Eastwood's technological resources comes from a place of love and concern. Technology has an important role to play in assisting those of us with disabilities. Catherine's voice grew stronger, more passionate. But technology alone isn't enough. The human connection in music therapy, the relationship between therapist and patient, the emotional expression that occurs during creation and performance, these elements can't be replicated by software or AI. They're essential components of healing. She extended her hand, and Violet stepped forward to provide support as Catherine's medication-induced fatigue began to take effect. What I'm advocating for isn't an either-or approach, but a both-and solution. Enhance Eastwood's technological resources, yes, but preserve and strengthen the music therapy program that has proven so valuable to students like me. Catherine's words hung in the air, their simple truth resonating with the board members. Richard's expression remained unreadable, but his eyes never left his daughter's face. The piece I performed tonight tells the story of my journey, Catherine continued, her voice growing softer as her energy waned, from isolation to connection, from limitation to possibility. That journey was made possible not just by technology, but by music, by the dedicated therapists and teachers who saw beyond my disabilities to my potential. She turned toward Violet, a smile of genuine gratitude crossing her face. Including Eastwood's newest music therapist, who has shown me in just 2 weeks that there are still new paths to explore, new connections to be made. As Catherine finished speaking, the room fell silent. Chairman Porter cleared his throat, visibly moved. "Thank you, Miss Wells, for your candor and courage. Your testimony will certainly inform our decision." Richard rose from his seat, his expression transformed. The calculating businessman was gone, replaced by a father seeing his daughter clearly, perhaps for the first time in years. He crossed to Catherine and, to everyone's surprise, embraced her. "I've been so focused on fixing what's wrong that I've missed seeing what's right," he said quietly, though in the silent room his words carried clearly. "Your music tonight, I've never heard you play like that before." "Because I was finally playing my truth," Catherine replied softly. "Not what I thought you wanted to hear." Richard turned to face the board. "I'd like to propose a modified approach to the restructuring," he announced. One that integrates technological advancement with an expanded music therapy program, using Catherine's experience as a model for treating complex conditions. The shift in the room was palpable, relief from Jackson Howard, surprise from several board members, and quiet satisfaction from Eliza, who stood near the door. "Furthermore," Richard continued, "I propose establishing an endowed position for a director of music therapy at Eastwood, with Ms. Anderson as the inaugural appointee, given her innovative approach and clear rapport with students." Violet gasped softly, stunned by the unexpected proposal. Catherine's hand found hers, squeezing it in shared triumph. 6 months later, Violet stood in the newly renovated music therapy wing of Eastwood Academy, watching as Catherine led a workshop for younger students. The tremor in Catherine's hands was still present, but her movements were fluid as she demonstrated a technique for a 12-year-old boy with both visual impairment and dyspraxia. "Feel the pattern," she instructed gently, guiding his fingers over the keys. "Music isn't just about playing notes. It's about creating neural pathways that help your brain and body communicate better." The integrated program developed by Richard Wells's tech team and Eastwood's music department had already garnered national attention. Adaptive technology enhanced traditional music therapy techniques, while data collection provided empirical evidence of the approach's effectiveness. As the session concluded, Catherine made her way to where Violet stood, navigating the familiar space with confidence. "Dad called from Tokyo," she said with a smile. "The international expansion is moving forward. 3 new schools will implement our program by next fall." "That's wonderful news," Violet replied, still amazed by how much had changed. Richard Wells had transformed his daughter's challenge into a mission, leveraging his considerable resources and influence to advance treatment options for people with similar conditions worldwide. As they walked together toward the recital hall for an afternoon performance, Catherine's arm linked comfortably with Violet's, their steps synchronized after months of working closely together. "You know what I remember most about that night?" Catherine said suddenly. "Not the performance, not the board meeting, but the moment you helped me walk to the stage. You didn't see me as fragile or broken or inspiring. You saw me as a musician with something important to say." Violet smiled, remembering how far they'd both come from that glittering gala where whispers had followed the billionaire's blind daughter. "I still do," she said simply. "And now, thanks to you, the world is finally listening."